Hello everyone, I am Caleb and this is going to be the first episode in a series on how to make a main menu in Roblox. Now for this episode, I'm going to be talking about the basics of Roblox Studio's UI, how it works, and what you need to know about it to begin making your main menu. So without further ado, let's begin. Now when you launch Roblox Studio for what may or may not be your first time, you're probably going to see something that looks like this. And once you load in your base plate, you're going to have a spawn point and an empty base plate all around you, but you're not going to have a lot to work with. And so to fix this, first we have to open Explorer and Property tabs over here to be able to work with anything and everything that Studio has to offer. And so to do this, if the tabs aren't already open, we go to our tabs up here, we go to View, Explorer, and Properties, and we just click on both of those, and now we have our Explorer and our Properties tab both open. So now, with both of your Explorer and Property tabs open, we can begin to work. So how does UI work in Roblox Studio, and how is it structured? And that may sound weird to say, as it's just UI, but it has a structure to it. And so if I were to click on this little plus sign next to Starter GUI, I can put a lot of things into it. Now, most of these are only for the workspace, and so we have a bunch of constraints here. This isn't going to do anything in our Starter GUI, obviously, because it's not UI. What we want is this screen GUI up here. And so you'll notice when I click on Starter GUI, a new tab appears up here called UI. Now this has all of the objects that you could ever want when you're working with UI in Roblox Studio. So you can see that all of this other stuff is grayed out right now, and I can't select it, and no matter how much I try to click on it, it won't let me put it in. That's because we need a screen UI. Now if I were to go to the plus sign and manually insert a frame, you can see that it doesn't show up anywhere. And that's because we need a screen GUI. So to put a screen GUI in, we click on Start a GUI, our UI tab will pop up, and we just put screen GUI right here. And so now we have a screen GUI. Now, the reason we need a screen GUI is because the way that UI works in Roblox Studio is you have containers, basically. And so a screen GUI is like a warehouse. Think of it like a warehouse. Your frames, that's your frame and scrolling frame. Today we're going to talk about the frame, and we'll talk about the scrolling frame later in the series possibly. But for right now, we're just going to be focused on the frame. The frame, you can see now, it shows up under our screen GUI and our Explorer over here, because we have to have a screen GUI. Think of a screen GUI like a warehouse, and frames as boxes within that warehouse. Now, you don't necessarily have to have frames, and I could just insert a bunch of stuff under the screen GUI, and it would pop up. You can already see just from the few things I've inserted, that'll get really messy really quick, and we're going to have a lot to go through if we do it individually like this. So that's why we usually use frames just for organizational purposes if nothing else, to work as boxes within our warehouse, which is what the screen GUI functions as. So think of the screen GUI as a warehouse, and the frames as boxes within that warehouse that can hold everything else. Now you can see when I try to insert it to the frame from this top menu here, it inserts it into the screen GUI instead. So instead of using this top menu to insert things into the frame, we'll go to this little plus sign right here, and then I can insert things directly into this frame, as you can see here. And so now we know that screen GUIs are like our warehouses, and frames are like our boxes to keep things organized. So what are text labels and text buttons and boxes and all these buttons and labels we have? Well, first of all, I'm going to expand this frame just a little bit to give us better visibility, and so we can have our text button. Now, text buttons are, well, buttons that display text. I don't know what else you'd really be expecting. And so I'm going to change the background color of this to black just so that we can see it clearer, and the text color of it to white, that way we can still see what it says. Now, you'll notice that our text is very small and it just says button right now. So if I go to properties and then I find the text property in our properties tab, I can change this to example. And now, of course, instead of example, you would put what you actually want to display on the button, but just for this example, it works nonetheless. But our text is still really small, and no matter how much bigger I make the button, our text stays the same size. So now to fix this, we can go down a little bit more and find this property called text. Now, as you can see, this is a little checkbox. That means it's a boolean. That means it's true or false. So if we click it, we make it true, and we can see that all of a sudden our text actually fits the size of the button. And as we expand or shrink the button, the text expands and shrinks with it. And this is what I personally use to make all of my buttons look readable. Because if the text was just this size all the time, it would be very hard to read, especially for mobile players. So that's our text buttons. Now we have text labels, and text labels are more or less exactly the same thing, just they're not buttons and you can't click on them, and you can't tell them to do things when they're clicked. We still have our text property, and we still have our text scale property so that we can scale and set the text respectively. And then our next thing that we have is image labels and image buttons. So image labels and image buttons are different from the text labels and text buttons, and these need our URL to load. So the simplest way to obtain this is to go to View, find the little hammer icon up here, which is the toolbox, and we can see already I have an AI generated image that I made just for this video that I uploaded to Roblox, and I can go to these three dots down here, which if you don't know, you can just find one, click on it, click these three dots, click copy asset ID, go to your image button or image label. I'll do the image label for this one. Click image, Control V to paste, and this is the image property. Hit enter, and we can see that now I have my picture of a spaceship in Roblox Studio, and it's displaying in our view window right. So now, let's say I wanted this picture to show up on our image button. Again, I would go to three dots, copy asset ID, find the image property, Control V to paste our ID, and then right here, I now have this picture of space for my text button. So text buttons, or image buttons, excuse me, and image labels both display images, and they're just like the labels, but image buttons are identical to image labels besides the fact that they can be clicked. And text buttons are identical to text labels besides the fact that they also can be clicked, hence them being called buttons. This is all we're going to use with the toolbox for right now, so we can go ahead and close that. And now we have a basic introduction to all of our UI elements except for the text box, but we're not going to focus on that right now as that we won't need it in our main menu. So now we still have our frame and we have our screen UI. So you might think now, okay, I have a basic understanding of what most of this stuff up here is. So how do I actually start making the menu? Well, we'll get to that in part 2.